If it becomes clear that this is the result of terrorists acting under the incitement of Hamas inside Israel, then we will be in the early stages of what I fear could become a third iteration of the intifada. I do not believe that we can have a full victory against Hamas if they continue to hold our hostages. These terror organizations will not stop for as long as they exist. All of this demonstrates why Israel must destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. The fires that have currently come under control in Israel really caused tremendous damage during the course of Wednesday night. They destroyed about 20,000 dunams, which is 5,000 acres of land, and they also destroyed 70% of Judea and Samaria's Canada Park. So the scale of that destruction was enormous, absolutely enormous. And there is a tie-in between potentially the fires that have raged across the areas surrounding Jerusalem and the activities of the Israel Defense Forces inside the Gaza Strip. In the areas that surround the opening to the terror tunnels, many of which still exist inside the Gaza Strip, there is brush and bush that covers the surroundings. And it's within that brush and bush that Hamas has laid in wait and has set traps, booby traps, and launched fire against members of the Israel Defense Forces. As a result of that, the IDF has begun burning that brush fire away. But the IDF has done so, of course, without targeting civilians inside the Gaza Strip and without further targeting civilian structure within the Gaza Strip. As a consequence of that, it's thought that Hamas may have instructed Palestinian Arabs living inside Judea and Samaria, or even Arab Israelis living inside the state of Israel, and that's unclear to this point, to respond by setting fire to areas of Israel's forests. And there is very clear video evidence, in my opinion, of several deliberate ignitions of fires in the area surrounding Jerusalem. Now, there have been 3 arrests that have come about, and those 3 arrests are based on the suspicion of deliberate arson. And it's worth noting that unlike inside the Gaza Strip, where the IDF is burning brush in order to prevent terror attacks, inside the state of Israel, these brush fires, if it's proven to be the work of terrorists and lone wolf actors, those have been launched in order to target civilians and to target civilian infrastructure. So it's quite a juxtaposition, but it does seem to be that there is a relationship. If it becomes clear that this is the result of terrorists acting under the incitement and to some degree the direction of Hamas inside Israel, then we will be in the early stages of what I fear could become a third iteration of the intifada. We have lived through the first and second intifada. We have lived through the stabbing intifada that took place in 2015. If this is proven to be another phase of the intifada, it will be the fire-lighting phase that is aimed at burning down the state of Israel and again targeting our civilians. In terms of the Israel Defense Forces and its role in quelling these fires, firstly, I'm pleased to inform the viewers that the fires have largely been brought under control at this point after the IDF and the firefighters of Israel's fire service have battled against them for some 30 hours. But I'm always concerned about the fact that every crisis falls under the purview of an already very stretched Israel Defense Forces. And it's for that reason that it's time, in my opinion, that the members of the ultra-Orthodox community, the Haredi community, take up their place among the ranks of the Israel Defense Forces and provide the 10 to 20,000 soldiers, additional soldiers, that the Minister of Defense has expressed are desperately needed within the number of the IDF writ large. I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is absolutely right when he expresses that victory over our enemies is the supreme goal of this war. But A central part of realizing that supreme goal must remain the redemption of our hostages, because for as long as our hostages are held by Hamas in the dungeons of Gaza, Hamas will enjoy some semblance of victory, depraved victory though it may be, victory nonetheless over Israel. Now, I don't know how many of the viewers have any familiarity with the families of hostages that were kidnapped on October 7th, but I do have some degree of familiarity. I've worked with several of those families, and I've also served in this war inside the Gaza Strip. And I must tell you that during that service inside Gaza, I was constantly escorted by the dreadful possibility that directly beneath the very ground on which we walked, drove across, traversed dozens upon dozens of times, a hostage may well have been chained, beaten, starved, and worse by their terror captors, Hamas, and that we, as soldiers above ground, would never know, would never succeed in rescuing those hostages. And I mention those dual roles, my work with the hostage families and my time serving in the IDF during this war, because as someone who has continued to work with those who want their loved ones back, and as somebody who will continue to serve alongside the thousands upon thousands of other soldiers who readily go to war to do that which I've undertaken, and a great deal beyond anything I will ever do, it's very, very clear in my mind that the two war aims are inextricably linked. I do not believe that we can have a full victory against Hamas if they continue to hold our hostages, and I do not believe that we will ever have a full victory if we redeem and rescue our hostages, but leave Hamas intact, able to reconstitute and replenish their ranks. Therefore, both goals must be achieved, and one begets the other in my mind. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu's insistence that Hamas will not remain inside the Gaza Strip is an insistence that is not even remotely controversial in any way, shape, or form. There is no head of state who would be supported by the electorate if they were to express that they were comfortable with a genocidal, fundamentalist, terrorist army and organization remaining in power in an area that is approximately a 50-minute drive from their country's capital. But that is precisely the situation in which Israel finds itself. Hamas is ensconced inside the Gaza Strip, and it is approximately a 50-minute drive from there to Jerusalem. It is a murderous terrorist regime. It is a regime that wishes to conduct October 7th style attacks at any and every possible opportunity. It is a regime that was voted in by the Gazan people. They recruit to their ranks from among the Gazan people. They are cheered on and applauded by the Gazan people. And therefore, in my mind, neither Hamas nor the Gazan people can remain proximate to Israel's borders. Now, an alternative to the current situation has been put forward by President Trump, namely the relocation of the Gazan population outside the Gaza Strip. I believe Israel should leap on that opportunity with all possible diplomatic force that it can muster. As for the notion that the Palestinian Authority should somehow be entrusted as the custodians of Gaza, I want to provide some very clear context to prove the absurdity of that idea and why I believe Prime Minister Netanyahu is right to dismiss it on its face. Firstly, the Palestinian Authority was routed and driven out by Hamas from the Gaza Strip in 2006, and the PA has therefore been shown to be utterly incapable of effective governance inside Gaza. Secondly, during the events of the Second Intifada, which was a wave of Palestinian homicide bombings launched against innocent Israelis, incidentally Jewish and non-Jewish Israelis alike, that lasted from approximately the year 2000 to 2005. During that time, Palestinian Arab attacks emanated from the area of Judea and Samaria. And that wave of terror was so unyielding and so unrelenting that it placed Israeli parents in the position where, when they were sending their children to school on a given day, they would divide those children among different buses from the same destination to the same point of arrival and back again, armed with the macabre hope that if one child was killed by way of a homicide, bombing, and detonation of a bus, as was one of the central tactics of the Second Intifada, the other child may yet make it home safely and unscathed. That is how brutal that Intifada was. Now, the fact is that those attacks were launched by Hamas, but they were also launched by Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. And it was only when the Prime Minister of Israel at the time, Ariel Sharon, in response to what really did feel like unending terror in Israel, decided to construct Israel's security barrier that prevents crossings by terrorists from Judea and Samaria into the states of Israel. It was only at that point, after that fence was built, that the Palestinian Authority suddenly, miraculously, I would say cynically, changed its policy from the mass targeting and murder of innocent Israelis to a policy of non-violence. And they did that for one reason. They did it because the security fence effectively robbed them of their ability to murder Israelis. So I do not accept that that ethos has changed amongst the Palestinian Authority. I don't want to put that possibility to the test. And I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is absolutely right to declare them unfit for governance of the Gaza Strip, therefore. Now, all of that is what occurred when the Palestinian Authority was able to enter into Israel. Let me just tell viewers what happened when Israelis were crossing into the areas governed by the Palestinian Authority, moving in the opposite direction now. Anyone who is Jewish today in Israel, who is approaching the areas that are governed by the Palestinian Authority, will pass by warning signs that are written in very clear red and white lettering, and they say on them that if you cross into the areas governed by the Palestinian Authority, you may lose your life, that doing so endangers your very existence. Those signs can be seen by anybody to this day. Well, just one example of why those signs exist took place on October 12th, 2000, during the Second Intifada. Palestinian Authority police arrested 2 Israeli reserve soldiers who had accidentally entered the city of Ramallah. And when the Palestinians found out about that, a crowd of more than 1,000 Palestinian Arabs gathered in front of the station, calling for the death of those 2 IDF soldiers. Both soldiers were eventually beaten, stabbed, and disemboweled, and one body of the soldiers was then set on fire and thrown out of one of the upper windows. That's what happens on the watch of the Palestinian Authority. So no, the Palestinian Authority cannot rule or administer the Gaza Strip. The elimination of Radwan force operatives inside southern Lebanon is not a surprise and shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. This is a continuation of a long-standing, decades-deep, determined policy of Hezbollah to launch terror attacks against innocent Israelis from southern Lebanon into northern Israel and beyond. During my own reserve duty years ago, we trained for the possibility that Radwan forces would infiltrate northern Israel and that we would be sent forward to extricate our towns and our people from their clutches. This is something that we were training for years, well in advance of the horrors of October 7th, 2023. And Hamas, on that date, on October 7th, was clearly very, very hopeful that the Radwan forces would join the Hamas terror attack, but Hamas mistimed its assault from that point of view. What people need to understand and recognize is that these terror organizations will not stop for as long as they exist. They can be obstructed, they can be weakened, they can be enfeebled, but as long as they exist, they will seek to launch terror against Israelis. I have personally operated in Missile Spell. I did so during the Second Lebanon War that took place in 2006, nearly 20 years ago. And just that consideration alone really demonstrates how long-lasting this challenge is and how likely it is that it will remain a challenge for many, many years to come. But most importantly, all of this demonstrates why Israel must destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. It must do everything it can to bring about regime change in Iran, because all of this will stop only once the Iranian patron is robbed of its nuclear ambitions permanently and punished by the international community for its hegemonic terror activities militarily and economically, and hopefully, as I said, overthrown. So, in summary, to stop Hezbollah, its patron Iran must be stopped, and Israel, I believe, is capable of bringing that about. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu repeating the phrase that no deal is better than a bad deal when it comes to Iran's nuclear weapons program is cause for concern, because that is precisely the phraseology that he used in advance of the signing of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that was the initiative of President Obama in 2015, and with which Israel still then, under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu, deeply, overtly and explicitly opposed. So the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu now, in the context of the second Trump administration, is reverting to the very same language, to me implies that he's very concerned that a bad deal may end up being pursued by the Trump administration and may even end up being hatched by the Trump administration and ratified by the same. All of that is to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu, in my view, is going to have to make a decision. And that decision is whether or not Israel is going to go it alone when it comes to targeting, striking, downgrading, and I believe eliminating Iran's nuclear weapons program. I have personally interviewed former heads of the Mossad, former heads of the Shin Bet, former chiefs of the General Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, former directors of the CIA in the United States, and all of those individuals that I've interviewed have returned with the affirmative when I have asked them whether or not Israel has the capabilities to destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. As a result of that, I'm firmly of the belief that this really comes down to a matter of political will. I am hopeful that if Prime Minister Netanyahu sees President Donald Trump moving towards signing what Israel views as a bad and dangerous deal, that Prime Minister Netanyahu will launch the strikes and any of the attacks that he has at his disposal against Iran's nuclear weapons program. And I do hope that he will do so with or without the green light from the Americans. It's, of course, far better and much preferred if Israel can take out Iran's nuclear weapons program with the assistance and in coordination with the Americans. But if that coordination and assistance is not forthcoming, Israel must be able to go this alone. It has gone alone against nuclear weapons programs in Syria. It did so in 2007. It has gone alone against nuclear weapons programs in 1981. It did so in Iraq, in Iraq. It must be prepared to do so again today. One final point on this issue. I really do believe that the matter should no longer be put for the consideration and consumption of the general public. I think that the decision to strike or not to strike ought to be made in the most sealed of sealed rooms. It's time for the Prime Minister to make his decision, and I believe and hope that he will do so in line with what he believes is in the best interests of Israel's near, middle, midterm, and long-term security. Hi, everybody. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out the MirYam Institute YouTube channel, where you'll find more analysis, podcasts, and incredible footage. If you want to see the latest content, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and be sure to get all of the notifications as and when the headlines hit. And we want to know what you think and the questions that you want answered. So please let us know in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you next time.